And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Bill Tucker, filling in for Steve. Glad you could be with us. Joining me now, Ian Tuttle. He's the William F. Buckley Fellow at the National Review and a member of the National Review editorial board. Ian, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start this conversation with an article that you have posted up now on nationalreview.com. Folks, you should go read it. It's about maybe the single most controversial figure outside President-elect Trump at the moment in politics, and that's Steve Bannon. Depending on who you believe, the left calls him an anti-Semite, they call him a Nazi, they call him the leader of the alt-right, a racist, leading white supremacy groups all around the country. But other people just call him the editor at the Breitbart and a guy who has been a close advisor to the Trump campaign. Ian, you know Steve. Reading your piece was really interesting. There is, though, a lot of hysteria surrounding Steve Bannon. Is he an appropriate choice for Donald Trump, do you think, to serve as a senior strategist amidst the controversy that comes with him?
Yeah, that's exactly the prudential question that's at issue. And I think he raises serious questions, serious concerns, which I tried to suggest and maybe address in the piece. My read, based on the information that I've heard, is that, Steve Bannon is not David Duke. He's not Bull Connor. That as far as, what his personal attitudes are. Now, that said, for 4 years, he's been the chairman of Breitbart News. Right. And under his leadership, Breitbart has flirted with and sort of become the home of, Bannon himself called it the platform for the alt-right, fringe of, vocal white supremacists, anti-Semites, internet trolls, etc. Some very nasty individuals. And, for anyone who thinks that they don't exist, you can go read my Twitter feed right now. They do. And Bannon has, I don't know whether Bannon sympathizes with them personally, but he's given them an outlet, and he's given their cause oxygen. And so the question now is, by making him chief advisor to the president, basically the equivalent of Karl Rove's position in the Bush White House, is that movement going to have a disproportionate influence in a Trump administration? That should be deeply concerning.
Do you think Steve should address these concerns directly himself, or do you think it's up to President-elect Trump to do so? And I ask that in the context, and you mentioned it in the article. Look, he was in Hollywood. One of his co-writers was, in fact, Jewish. David Horowitz at Breitbart wrote a very passionate defense of Steve Bannon yesterday, saying he is anything but he is not an anti-Semite. His best friend from college is black. There doesn't seem to be anything in his life, as he's lived it publicly anyway, personally, that would suggest he has any sympathies with these particular viewpoints. But he sure somebody seems to need to address them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as I try to negotiate in the piece, the question of his personal sympathies might not, in fact, be the most important question. The most important question is, what type, is there an opportunism here that's given room for a really virulent strain of right-wing extremism to have a voice in American politics in a way that it hasn't in a long, long time. I don't think this is any longer on Bannon to address. I think it's on Trump. The political point here is, of course, that Bannon, being one of the close members of the Trump campaign, was almost certainly going to get a position in the administration. The question is, how influential is that position going to be? Donald Trump is at some point going to have to address that this responsibility is with him.
Well, and I understand what you're saying, Ian, but I have to say that, I was never a fan of Karl Rove. I was not a guy in his camp at all. He'd rather not been there. But Bush certainly had his right to have him there. He trusted him. He talked to him. He counseled with him. You know, those who were passionate supporters of Trump would probably argue the same thing about Steve Bannon. And he does serve, don't you think, as a reminder to the people and to Trump that there was definitely, you know, this drain the swamp sort of identity with in fact, Steve Bannon, which I don't think he'd argue with. He's kind of important in some ways to Trump's brand, if you will.
No, I think that's right. You know, putting Bannon into a senior position like that is an indication to a whole lot of Trump voters who are not racist, you know, nothing, they're not bigoted, et cetera. They just are tired of, you know, what they've seen in Washington and wanted Trump to sort of be that anti-establishment warrior. Putting Bannon into that senior position is a signal to them that he heard them. On the other hand, Bannon is a deeply controversial individual. There might be other options, you know, for that same sort of anti-establishment ethos to have a place in the Trump White House without it also opening up the serious questions that Bannon's appointment raises. You know, I have written, and we here at National Review have said, you know, people need to give Donald Trump a chance. He's the legitimately elected president of the United States, but he's also coming into office with a lot of serious skeptics under, you know, clouds of suspicion and distrust. And it's going to be his responsibility to create a team in the White House and an atmosphere that gives people reason to trust him and think that he's going to be a fair-minded representative of the whole country. And that's, I think, what the Bannon appointment gives question to.
Yeah, we have only about a minute left, so let me ask it. Let's end with Reince Priebus. Because in a lot of ways, Reince is just the absolute polar opposite. He's forgettable. He's not a hand grenade. He's not waiting to explode. He's kind of the predictable guy. Don't you think that Priebus does offer a little bit of consolation to those worried about the things you raise?
Yes, I think so. And if it had been the alternate situation in which Bannon were chief of staff, I think the questions would be even graver. But Priebus is an eminently competent individual who's going to, I think, be important in sort of tempering Trump's worst impulses and bringing the reasonably sober-minded folks over in the House and Senate leadership into a position of influence in the White House.
All right, Ian, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much. Ian Tuttle, William F. Buckley Fellow at the National Review and a member of the National Review editorial board. Thank you.
Thank you.
President-elect Donald Trump is learning what it's really like to win the election and prepared to take power. In the case of one of his signature campaign promises on deporting illegal immigrants, it means ratcheting down the rhetoric and understanding what he can actually accomplish. Newsmax host Ed Berliner puts it all into perspective after one member of law enforcement throws up a roadblock.
You're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely. President Eisenhower, probably the real number is 2.3 million. Some people say it's 1.5 million, went through this process.
It was inhumane. It was abusive to Mexicans that had come into the United States at our request to work during World War II.
For the 11 million people, come on, folks, we all know you can't pick them up and ship them back across the border. It's a silly argument. It's not an adult argument.
Regardless of the characterization, it is the argument America's about to have in earnest, as President-elect Donald Trump now has to make good on his various promises. And deporting millions of those here illegally is a cornerstone of his platform, one that is already eroding away ever so slightly as the new man in charge begins to understand the difference between campaign promises and reality.
He will lay out the specifics of that plan that he would implement as President of the United States.
Will that plan include a deportation force, the kind that you just heard in that soundbite and that he talked about during the Republican primaries?
To be determined.
We are not planning on erecting a deportation force. Donald Trump's not planning on that.
The issue at hand is the legality of how those in this country illegally would be deported. And the president in waiting is now being faced with reaction from those who enforce the laws on what was said to get elected and what current laws dictate how and when such actions are taken.
LA Police Chief Charlie Beck says a future government crackdown on illegal immigration won't involve LAPD.
We don't make detentions or arrests solely based on status, whether it's immigration status or any other type of status.
Legally speaking, Trump could immediately change the focus of immigration agents and could unilaterally revoke the deportation protections provided by President Obama. But how will he deal with those at the local level who claim it's not how we should be doing things as a land comprised of immigrants? Ed Berliner, Newsmax TV.